Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wisdom of Friends podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. This is a podcast where you get to learn more about your friends and community, their wisdom, their trials and tribulations, timeless insights, and their secrets. Now, let's get into the show. Please welcome your host, Cal Arras.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Wisdom of Friends. This is episode 10, season 1. And I'm really delighted to be welcoming Jim McLaughlin on this show. Now, Jim, over the past 20 years, has been on a journey to reinvent everything in his life. He had to. Nothing was working. All his strategies for making it in life were tapped out, or based on weak assumptions. From being an unemployed, divorced, lonely, and cynical man at midlife, Jim has gone on to explore 3 different career tracks and has created a family, an amazing wife, and 2 wonderful teenage boys. He's now settled on executive coaching and management consulting as the career track that he was born and bred for. He helps business owners and their managers go beyond the obstacles that stand in the way of their success. Along the way, he's led a community leadership program administered by Cal State San Marcos. He has founded TEDx Temecula, a locally organized TED event. He has also founded a Toastmasters Club and a Gavel Club for teens. He served on the board of trustees at his church and was recently elected president of the Temecula Valley Symphony. Friends, he has even emceed a fashion show this past spring. So we talk about in this episode about his journey, about not losing the enthusiasm when life dished out all kinds of failures, or were they failures in the first place? Those were stepping stones that allowed him to learn some new distinctions about life and success. So this is one of the very interesting conversations I've had in recent times, and I hope you enjoy it. So please pull up a chair and listen in. And without further ado, let's welcome the one and only Jim McLaughlin. So good evening, Jim. Welcome to the Wisdom of Friends show. I'm really excited and delighted that you took some time to be on the show. And let me start off by saying my first impressions of you. I think it was almost 10 years ago when I attended a workshop on executive leadership that you and Margaret Bola had led in San Diego. And it was one of those amazing workshops that came at the right time for me in my career. And we covered a lot of distinctions as it relates to the 3 laws of performances. But I think that 1 or 2 things that really stuck with me was your listening of people. I mean, you were able to see the blind spots that most of us had in the room, and you were able to offer us some really concrete advice and tips that we could, actionable tips, let me add that we were able to go ahead and implement in our projects that we were working on, and that was really beneficial. And one of the distinctions that I remember still from that workshop was that performance of people really correlates to how situations occur to us. And it arises out of language, and I think the power of declaration and future-based language has got such a big impact and power over how the context is defined for us and how we can really create amazing results. So, and having applied those distinctions to my life, I've had some really tremendous success. So I want to thank you for that. And so again, welcome to the Wisdom of Friends show, Jim.
Acosta, thank you very much. That's very generous of you. First of all, to have me on your program. It's a real treat and a real privilege. And it's great to interact with you in this forum. I believe it was about 10 years ago, and I very vividly remember my first couple of interactions with you. And yeah, from there, it really has been a journey into that aspect of the three laws of performance, and our performance really is a function of how situations are occurring for us right now in the moment. It's something that I get to work with people on every day, and it's it really does provide an access to something that isn't readily available as we're going through our lives on a regular, sort of sometimes routine basis. And I also want to thank you for the acknowledgement of the power of listening, and listening for what's going on. How are those situations occurring? What are those blind spots? Because it really is, my background is as a scientist, and so I'm always exploring, I'm always mining for the gold, and also looking for, well, where's that, that ore, where's the rock that's in the way of the ore? And it really is a joy and a privilege. And we spoke earlier, you mentioned passion, and I think that's really where my passion lies, in uncovering and discarding the rubble, if you will, to expose the gold and the joy within us all.
That's so great, Jim. So thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate it. So one of the ways we start off our show is asking our guest as to what is their favorite quote or philosophy that they live by, and how have you applied it to your life. So would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think my favorite quote, it comes up over and over again. It's from Sir Winston Churchill, and he said, success is going from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. And I'm not the only one that has had his share of failures, but there's just something really inspiring about, without losing any enthusiasm, let's just keep on going. And so it just inspires me all the time when I think about that. And just every time I bring it up, it just makes me smile, and brings forth just what life is and what life has to offer. And no matter where you go or what you do or how it turns out, just success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
I like that. And for me, the distinction that really resonates with me as far as failure is concerned is that it's not a failure, it's feedback. And secondly, it's not failure until you actually quit and give up. So there's always an opportunity to learn from it and make a difference. So that's so great what you share about that. It's one of my favorite quotes as well. So what I'm curious about, Jim, is your journey up until this point. I know you are an executive management coach, and you've been doing management consulting as your career track for the last many, many years now. And what I'm curious about is, did you always know that this was your calling, or this was your passion and purpose? And how did that begin, and what was the journey like for you to up until this point?
Oh, great question. Speaking of failures, now let's see. When I was a kid, when I was very young, this isn't going to be a long story. That's a scary way to start a story. But I always wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. I think it was driven by, and to this day, a strength of mine is my curiosity. And from a young child, I always wanted to know how things worked. What's beneath the surface, what's going on. From my toys, taking them apart when they were broken to figure out what was wrong with them and trying to fix them and make them work better. That's just always been something it's just sort of the way my mind works, you might say. And being a doctor, it would fit within that pretty well. How the human body works, and I had a lot of respect for people in the medical profession, my doctor, and wow, what a cool profession. And then I got to college and took organic chemistry. And then I realized, wow, this is a journey that maybe I'm not really prepared for at this point in my life. I learned that it was very difficult, and that I was going to have to apply myself in a way that I didn't know how. So from there, I got into another field in the sciences just because as I mentioned, I was curious. So I ended up getting into geology, which is really the study of the earth, and if you understand it, or if you'll go with me on this, it's a study of what's beneath the surface, and I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this. And what's going on down there, and how do I mine for that data, and how do I piece together a picture, a model of how it's working, and how things are working down there, and sort of a three-dimensional conceptual or concept of how that's working. So that's sort of the career idea. Where I was sort of, I guess personally, I was very sort of logic, left brain oriented, and a little bit, let's just say I wasn't really much of a people person at the time. I was very much into the logic of how things work. And what I discovered is that people aren't very logical.
Yes.
They're not very rational, they don't, and all that. So you might say I never really did develop a set of people skills or relationship skills. I mean, I got by. I had, my few close friends, and I'm an introvert, and that's all I need. Just a few close friends, people that I can have, some intelligent conversations with and debate with, and that kind of a thing. And then I got to a point in my life where, I was, reached that sort of the midlife crisis area where those strategies were kind of bankrupt. I'd kind of tapped it out. I was at a point in my life where my career took a big transition, and my personal life, my marriage, or my personal life, my marriage came to an end after 10 years, and I was left with, wow. What happened? It's like everything that I held on to was gone. I as I characterize it now, it was a very difficult time for me, particularly with the loss of my marriage. It was, it was as though everything that I counted on was now gone, and including a sense of my future. I really got clear on how important the future is, because without having a created future, if I could use that language, without having a future, what showed up was all of my insecurities and how the future looked like I was going to be alone, I was going to be poor, I was going to be struggling and suffering. For that's what my future looked like. So that curiosity I mentioned earlier also got me engaged earlier in my life in psychology, so that aspect I mentioned earlier about people. There was certainly an appeal towards, what makes people work, what makes people tick, why do they do the things that they do, and they don't really seem to make any sense to me. Why don't they do it my way? The arrogance within myself. And so I really started embarking upon partially like recognizing, all right, what if I'm going to if I'm going to have the kind of life that I want for the second half of my life, what's that going to look like, and how do I get some measure of control or power over that? So I began immersing myself in the field of sort of personal growth and development, which I'd been exposed to when I was in high school. I took a self-hypnosis course, which just fascinated me, the power of the mind and that. So I started getting involved in that with landmark education, and it really opened up and gave me access to some new possibilities for my life, some new ways of living my life on purpose, rather than just going with the flow and taking life as it came, which was pretty much how I did my life in the past. And what that resulted in is a new marriage, 2 or 3 new careers along the way. And so we're about to celebrate our 16th anniversary with my second wife. And
congratulations on that.
Thank you. And we have two beautiful boys, 15. My oldest just turned 15, and my youngest is 13. And it truly is a life beyond my wildest dreams. And so I got into various other careers along the way until I landed in the coaching world, which really came out of that whole experience of being coached myself, having the opportunity to dabble in coaching others and using that perception or that ability to perceive and listen for what's going on with others, and having some success at making a difference with people and showing them what they haven't been able to see for themselves, and really thought, wow, this is really it's a privilege, it's a blessing, it's a gift to be able to make a difference with people like that. And 10 years ago, with the tumultuous economy, I had an opportunity to look at what was next for me. And through, you mentioned Margaret Bola earlier. I had known her for a number of years, and I know she had been involved in coaching, and I started asking her, what do I need to do? What's the path that I need to take to sort of do what you do, to make that difference, not in a, well, let me not have it be a negative, but in a way that is like my calling. It's not something that I'm doing while I'm doing something else, but it's something that I'm devoted to fully. And that's how I got to be where I am today, if you will.
That's so
it
great.
was certainly a lot of twists and turns, but I think everything that I did along the way was something that needed to happen for me to get the skill set, if you will, that I have now.
No, that's nicely shared, Jim. And as you can predict, that I probably have a lot of questions regarding that, and we'll get to that in a second. But what I really like from your sharing, a couple of things. The through line for me is obviously failure was never something that stopped you completely. You figured out a way, like so many other successful people that I've talked to in the past on this podcast, and that it's really a platform and a stepping stone for more success, if you will. And for you, the journey began with a dream to be a medical doctor, as that was your dream growing up. And then you got into geology, and one of the fascinations about geology for you was to see what was underneath or below the surface. And I must add, having interacted with you over the past many years, that you do have that knack of listening to the unsaid, if you will, in the communication. Because, when there is communication, there is a third component to communication, which is the things that are not said. And you have a knack for listening to that. And that's what I wanted to acknowledge you for. And finally, looks like having gone through the divorce and trying out different career tracks, you stumbled upon a program called Landmark Education, where you got coached yourself, and then that brought you into the opening for being a coach yourself, and so that's where we are at this point, and that seems to be very fulfilling and satisfying for you.
To no end.
Yeah, that's so great. Now, was there so the question that I have for you is, like, when it comes to executive coaching and management consulting, what specifically about coaching and consulting, let's start off with coaching for now, as to what about coaching that really speaks to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to have to reach for that a little bit. It seems like it should be right on the surface, right? So it has to do with the word that comes to mind is potential. And I have to add, a big part of it is I am such a fan, if you will, of the organization, business in particular as an organization, but the what's possible and what we've been able to achieve as a species, as a culture, as humanity, what we've been able to achieve when we come together toward a common cause, whether you're talking about a for-profit business or a nonprofit, but just what we're able to accomplish is just amazing. I mean, look at this technology that we're using right now, and we're at least 1,000 miles apart, right? And we're having this real-time conversation. It's just staggering to me what the possibilities are endless. So there's just what there is available through the power of people coming together around a common cause. And what I look at with coaching and with management consulting, which is really just another application of coaching, is a business and life itself, you may have heard this before, is really a network of conversations. Nothing happens without conversation, without your customers calling you and asking you for another order, right? Or engaging you to fulfill on a first order. There's conversation and conversations within the organization itself to deliver on a promise that you've made to a customer, a client. And the quality or the health or the nature of those conversation dictates the quality of the kind of results that you can produce. So, it's kind of like going back to the medicine thing. I'm looking for where is the dysfunction, where is the dis-ease in the organization that if it were resolved would increase throughput, would increase joy and happiness and productivity and all of those things that we all really, really want and really strive for and work hard for, but sometimes we don't know what's in the way. I heard a great comment a couple of years ago. We've all heard that phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, sometimes we've got our nose on the bark. We're not even aware it's a tree. We're so focused on what's right in front of us that sometimes we don't see where we are or where we're going. And that's what, that's one aspect of what coaching provides, is that, that third party's perspective, that ability to ask questions that haven't yet been asked or yet been asked in a way that opens up something in the way of a new possibility or simply a new way of approaching a problem or a situation.
No, that's so great. And I think one of the things you mentioned earlier was the fact that most often people are in the process of going for their default future, and they're so unaware of that there can be another created future. And then I think as a coach, one of the things that you do that I found to be amazingly beneficial for a lot of us managers and executives is the ability to bridge the gap from the default future to a created future that's more powerful, more has a component of leadership and self-expression to that. So could you talk a little bit about the default future and the created, invented future a little bit for our audience?
Yes, absolutely. I spoke a little bit to the default future earlier when I was talking about, my future of being alone and lonely and broke and all of that. So, the default future is the future that's just there. It's there by default. And I think most people relate to the future as, as a thing, as we're, it's something sort of coming at us and we're moving into it, and Christmas is coming and things like that. We use in language as though we're on sort of this, we're on this moving timeline, and we plan for it and we guard against certain things happening. But when we really step back and look, there really is, I'm fond of saying there really is no future, right? There's only, we've heard this, but when you really get, in your bones, as they say, that there really is only the present moment, and then the future is a function of that. The future gets created moment by moment as you as you move through it. Now, certainly there are circumstances that show up along the way, right? Those people again will do things that are unpredictable, or it'll start raining, literally or figuratively, on you, and we must adapt. But there's so much power in looking at a future and creating it from what is it that's important for me? What do I want to devote my life to? What is it that I want to devote my, this coming year to, or the rest of, the second half of 2017 to? What is the future that would, if that were to happen, it would be the greatest thing ever. And then converting that into a plan and taking action to make that happen. Because, we've heard that phrase of, the self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe it's going to happen, and it actually happens. Well, that's no surprise that the future that we see, you mentioned how situations occur for us, or our results are correlated to how situations occur for us, where the future is a situation, and how the future occurs for us dictates or is correlated with, meaning the actions that you take are always consistent with the future that you have in mind. So you can have the default future, which for me was a sense of loneliness and despair in that particular instance. Or you can look at, what is a future that I'm willing to invent and create and have my life be about and share with people and remind myself of, so that my actions are consistent with that, and that are actually going to cause that to happen to the best of my ability. Again, there are going to be circumstances that will show up, and you're going to make adjustments and adaptations to those circumstances. So it's a very powerful way to live your life and to operate, your business, your career, any aspect of what you are up to in your life. Now, I mentioned earlier, I was kind of up to, whatever comes along, I'll make the best of it. And I'm not knocking that, because there are times and there are situations where that may be the appropriate strategy. But, when that isn't carrying the day anymore, we want to stand up and say, I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna make that happen. I am up for the adventure. One of the other quotes that's one of my favorites is the Helen Keller quote that, life is a daring adventure or nothing. There is no security in nature, is, how she begins that quote. And I'm just so inspired by that. Now, I want life to be a daring adventure.
That is so inspiring, Jim. And for the benefit of the audience here, the default future that we're talking about also relates to the paradigm that we live in. And sometimes the paradigm is something that we are not even aware of, and it could be a programming from society, education, or culture, and that is our viewpoint of how the future occurs to us. And one of the ways that what Jim's talking about is creating an invented future or a created future is shifting that paradigm that is more empowering and gives us a sense of purpose, and then creates a future that pulls you into that future rather than going with the flow. So, and that's something that he talks about in his workshops and coaching, which is so amazing and powerful that people make significant gains in their productivity and performances. So, Jim, one of the things that I'm curious about is did you grow up, about your growing up years? Now, did you grow up in California? And what I'm wondering is, what did your parents do, and how did that shape your life?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I have lived in, with the exception of the 4 years that I attended college, I've lived in Southern California my entire life. I haven't found a good reason to leave.
Well, it's hard to leave the Sunshine State for sure.
Well, it's home. I grew up in Los Angeles, and and all that city has to offer. I know many people have a sort of a negative opinion of the traffic and the smog and blah 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 blah. But it's it's fairy tale land. It's a land of unlimited possibilities, and it's my home. And I've lived in San Diego. I've lived in Orange County. I currently live in Riverside County. I was in my parents. Starting going to that part of your question, my parents moved to California from Ohio in the 50s, and pretty much never looked back. They were out for the land of opportunity within the United States, and creating a new life for themselves, saying goodbye to the snow and saying hello to the California sunshine. And my dad was an engineer. Electronics engineer, so he worked in the space program throughout the 60s and into the early 70s. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom. She had a couple of jobs here and there. She did some teaching at the school I was at. She was a teacher at a school, as I just said that, and was pretty much dedicated to raising my sister and I. My sister is a little older than I am. She's about 3.5 years older than I am. We grew up in a little house in the valley, and just had kind of an idyllic childhood. The end of their lives was a little bit kind of tragic, if you will. They both died younger than they really should have. My mom, unfortunately, was an alcoholic, but there's a lesson in here. I don't bring this up to be sad, but it was a big lesson for me. My mom. Her whole life was dedicated to raising us kids, and when she left, or when my sister and I, moved out and got on our own, she kind of lost her purpose, and kind of as I characterize it, she kind of climbed in the bottle, and she didn't really have, as I characterize it, a strong purpose for her life, and to me, that is just such a demonstration of the importance of having a future for yourself, having something to dedicate your life and your energies to. Not everybody's gonna have the difficulties that she did, but we all have our challenges in one way or another. Our insecurities, our proclivities, our paradigms, as you mentioned, and many of our paradigms are related to who we are. Who we are for ourselves, who we are, and what we're capable of, so just the power of having something to devote yourself to that's bigger than you are, to challenge you, to engage you, to have you engage in that daring adventure I was speaking to earlier. But my parents were wonderful. I have nothing but great things to say about them, except that I lost them too soon. I was about 30 years old when they both passed away independent, or separate from each other for different reasons. And I sure wish I had been, let's say, mature enough to have a conversation like we're having right now. But I just wasn't back then, and I'm sure many people can relate. I'm sure there's people that are in their 50s and 60s that have lost their parents and wish they had a stronger relationship. So no regrets, just looking at the opportunity and the learning that I had from my my experience with them as my parents.
I appreciate the sharing, and the message there is to have the importance of having a future that calls to you and inspires you. So thank you for sharing that. So Jim, I know that you're also a pilot. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. Yes.
How did that come about? Were you always fascinated by flying, or?
Yeah, I used to dream when I was very young about being able to fly under my own power, and I know others that have had a dream like that as well. And it's just something that I've always dreamed about. There's some aspect of freedom, I guess, or and then at one point when I was young, I got to ride in a small airplane and knew that it was just going to be a matter of time before that happened. And I finally, when I was, I think, 34 years old, finally got off my butt and made something happen there. And it was really a remarkable learning and growing experience for me. There's, here's what it's like. I hope this communicates, but we live life on this planet in mostly a two-dimensional space. North, south, east, west, left, right. And when you're in the air, there's that third dimension that provides a perspective on our world that it's just, I don't know how to describe it other than, it brings everything together, I guess. And, it's nothing like, if you've ever heard what astronauts have said about how humble they are about looking back at the planet, and it's a life-changing experience. I won't equate it to that, but there's some sense of, wow, look at what this other dimension provides. I think there's probably parallels to that in the coaching as well. It's seeing something from another perspective, from another point of view, to rise up above the mountains that surround you. And I've nearly always lived in a place that was ringed by mountains, and rising up above those mountains and seeing what's beyond, the valley beyond, the ocean beyond, the landscape beyond, and just like, it's hard to describe other than awe, other than the connectedness of it all.
That is so beautiful, and I totally understand what you're referring to is the angle of vision changes, and with that you can see possibilities that previously could have been hidden from your point of view, and that's so great. I must also add, for the benefit of the audience, that Jim has led a community leadership program administered by CSU in San Marcos. He started a TEDx in Temecula, a locally organized TED event, and also started a Toastmasters Club, and was recently elected president of the Temecula Valley Symphony. And what fascinates me, Jim, is I'm going to ask you this. You recently even emceed a fashion show. Tell us about that.
Those last two things, the symphony and the fashion show, those were not, when you look out at, your sort of your default future, that was not anywhere near, neither one of those were anywhere near my default future. And neither was the TEDx event or the leadership program for Cal State San Marcos. They really showed up out of, let's see, I really guess I can't put them all in the same thing. So I'll address your question about the fashion show. That really occurred out of really a relationship, a partnership that I had created with another business leader in the community. We are in partnership in a couple of different ways. One is with TEDx Temecula. One is in a nonprofit that she operates, out of which the fashion show became was manifested, was realized. And what she's working on doing is creating a fashion industry in our own community. Now, my paradigm, if you will, is, well, that's weird, or that's ridiculous. I'm like, as a scientist, I'm like the furthest thing from fashion that you could imagine. I'd be happy wearing a uniform every day, so I didn't have to think about what I was going to wear. And if you looked at my closet, you'd say, well, you are wearing a uniform because everything you have is pretty much the same. And there I was, a little bit prior to the actual fashion show itself, and I got a real education on what modeling is and what fashion is, and it kind of blew my mind in a way to look at these models and how they blend with what they're wearing as like a work of art. And I had not seen that before. I had not even been interested in seeing that before, but there it was, that grabbed hold of me, and I just got an appreciation for something I didn't know was appreciatable, if that's the word. And then the next thing I know, it's like, well, we need some help. Can you MC this event? And I thought, well, that's a daring adventure. to put myself on a stage, and I guess my idol or model for a great MC is Billy Crystal when he used to do the Oscars. And how he would ad lib and play off of what was happening, and that was, my kind of like, wouldn't that be great to really entertain the audience from something that I know nothing about. I wonder how this is going to go. My curiosity kicked in, right?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, let's do this.
So I take it everything went well?
Well, some people came up to me afterwards and said, "You did a great job." And I said, "Okay, thank you. I'll take that." And I didn't question.
No, that's so commendable on your part to take on that as one of the projects. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of make forays into certain arts and culture over the last few years, specifically like dancing and organizing fundraising events for nonprofits related to culture and music. And I do have an opportunity coming up here that I was invited to MC for fusion dance and Asian fusion dance and Mediterranean fusion dance in Seattle, which is going to have some of the world's best artists and musicians performing. And that's going to be really a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good for you. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's an area that I still don't think I would go. It's dancing. But life is a daring adventure.
I think, yes, I'm going to keep reciting that until I'm done with my show. Well, that's great. That's so great. One question I do have for you before we jump into the next segment is, having gone through the ebb and flow of life, what's your definition of success? And how would you define greatness?
My definition of success. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm gonna have to like dig in for that. My first response is, well, I'll let you know when I get there, right? But I think, really, given what my life has been like, what my life has been about for the last 15, 20 years since I really, turned the corner on that and started creating, the life that I want. It really is, I guess, when I look at the successes that I've had and the success that I look forward to, it's really, I don't know how to say it without making it sound too trite, but it's really having made a contribution, having made a difference. There's, and it's not from a place of ego, but a place that you go, the place that you say, my contribution made a difference there. Because I was part of that, because I, whether you were part of it, whether you began it, whether you offered, some advice, whatever that looks like, that you can then see yourself as part of that success. That's the fulfilling part. I mean, there's the numerical value of success, right? The money you put in the bank, but people pay you to provide the value that you provide to them. But to me, it's really, it goes beyond that, because, money comes and goes, but the successes that I remember are the experiences of having made a contribution, having made a difference for someone, typically for someone or many.
No, I like that, and it's totally agree with you as far as it's really about making a difference. And I like that quote about, making the universe better than you found it. I believe it goes something like that. But it's really about leaving the place better than you found it, essentially. And I think that's totally agree with that. So moving on to our next section, Jim, these are some of the questions that we have received from our audiences, and I would like to ask you a few of them here. So the first question is, what stops people, in your view, from achieving their fullest potential?
Oh, that's easy. Fear. But it's not that simple, right? So it's fear of. I work with a lot of people who say, oh, fear of failure. Oh, fear of rejection. But those aren't really it. So this is where the digging beneath the surface comes in, right? So it's, and for myself, years ago, I would say, well, I'm not really afraid of anything. Like, fear isn't part of my life, but I didn't allow myself to experience fear. And what I mean by that is, well, when I got that, and that was kind of fairly recently, that I wasn't allowing myself to experience fear. I wasn't allowing myself to be uncomfortable. I was afraid of being uncomfortable. I was afraid of being afraid. And it's really easy to dismiss that. And how I would approach it when something risky would come along, I'd say, nah, I'm not interested. Right? That's just not for me. So I wasn't allowing myself to do the daring adventure. I wasn't allowing myself to face the fear. So it's, the short answer is it's fear. It's fear that stops us. I mean, really, what else is there other than? And so let me go a little bit further into fear of. For me, the biggest fear for me, and I'll admit it, it shows up from time to time still. It's fear of embarrassment. When I look back on the worst experiences of my life, were the times that I was ashamed. I had done something or didn't do something that I should have done, and all eyes were on me, and I felt, my face got all red and flushed, and it was just the most uncomfortable experience. It was an experience that I learned I never want to have that experience again, so I'm not going to put myself in situations where that's going to happen. But I think each of us has an expression of that. It's, I don't want to be uncomfortable, and it comes down to, I think, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And when we really get, well, what would I rather have, comfort or results? What would I really have, comfort or the woman of my dreams? I love to use the analogy of, there's probably nothing riskier to a man's identity, and I know this may sound sexist, but or if a woman who's asking for that big question, will you marry me or will you be my my life partner? The risk there is huge. What if she says no? Right? That whole future that I had in mind for myself is kaput. It's gone. Well, why do we put ourselves through that? Well, it's because that future that we see is worth taking that risk, because we can't be with ourselves if we don't ask that question. So that I'm sort of answering how to overcome the fear, but I think that's really what it is. If we're honest with ourselves, we'll look and just say, well, what is it that I could possibly be afraid of that would have me not take that action or not commit to that opportunity, perhaps. It really is looking and seeing, is it fear? And if it's not, then maybe it's just not in alignment with your values.
That's so great. The next question, Jim, is what is one book that you've read and reread or gifted it to people in your life, or any favorite workshop or seminar that you would like to recommend for our audience?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the 3 Laws of Performance. That's a book that I use in my coaching as sort of supplemental reading. It parallels much of the work that I do. And I also mentioned the Landmark Forum earlier. That really created a huge shift for me in my life. A book that I read recently that has had a profound impact on me very recently. I started reading it in May. Listening is the new reading, right? So it's an audio book, an Audible. And it's an older book. It's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
So Robert Pirsig, I love that book.
Yeah. Did you read it? Okay.
Yeah.
I had heard the title. I think it was written in 1974. I had heard the title and I thought, why would I want to know anything about motorcycle maintenance? I don't own a motorcycle, but I read it and oh my gosh, did it have have a profound impact on me. And I reread it. As soon as I finished it, I had to start it over again. And I just finished recently the second pass through it. And I am so looking for somebody to have a dialogue with about what they discovered from that book. And so just briefly, I don't even know how to talk about the book with this because there's so many different elements too. But one of the applications of it for me was on my camping trip I went on a couple of weeks ago, or a weekend before last, with a bunch of my college buddies, and I got to see in a couple of the individuals that were there. There were 8 of us, all guys that we went to college together, like 35 years ago, and we go camping every year together at this same spot, and we kind of all turn into 20-year-olds again. It's rather fun, and but I wouldn't share any of it with you because it's not. I would say it's not appropriate, but it's silly, right? It's stuff guys do, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got to relate to, or perhaps understand, a couple of people in a way that I hadn't really understood them before from having read that book, without going into the classical understanding and the romantic understanding. I'm a very classical understanding kind of guy, and I was able to understand the more romantic version of humanity in a new way that was very profound.
So for the audience, we'll include that title of the book in our show notes. So the next question, Jim, for you is, if people are looking at improving their productivity and performances, what small step or actions they can start taking immediately that can give them make a big difference for their time or effort?
Great question. One of the fundamental foundational elements that I find that people don't do to the degree that I thought they would be when I started, it's as simple as using a planner. And using it in a way that supports what you're up to. I mean, there's putting appointments in there. But really, anything that you commit to doing, that you make a promise about, ought to be in your calendar. And this is sort of the mindset around that. And I recommend people do it this way: is that on sometime between Friday noon and Monday noon, I like Sunday. Take a look at what you have going on in the upcoming 2 weeks and block out all of the appointments that you have. Look at your projects, look at your goals, and look at what are the steps that are required to accomplish those objectives, and get those into your calendar. I say that when you're doing this, when you're doing the planning process, you're in your right mind, right? You're not in the heat of battle. When you're engaged in your week, you're kind of in the heat of battle, and you're getting unexpected things happening, and people are upset, or you're upset, and all kinds of stuff is happening. Like the battlefield. I don't want to make it sound negative, but it's and so that's not a really good place oftentimes to be making your decisions about what to do next.
Yeah, I agree. Yes,
because you're going to be swayed by how you feel, rather than by what you've given your word to, by what you're committed to. So using a calendar, and if you're currently doing that, taking it to the next level, like having virtually everything scheduled out, so that you don't have to make any decisions in the heat of battle about what to do next. Now, include buffer time. Include your downtime, your family time, your meditation time, your exercise time, all of that. And I know people will say, "Well, I don't want to be ruled by my calendar." Well, if you're not going to be ruled by your word, then you're going to be ruled by what you feel like doing. And again, I realize this may sound like heavy-handed, but try it out. Really get that. If you want, like, what you're committed to having happen, especially if you're up to playing a big game or having a daring adventure, it's going to take something. It's going to take, that extra little bit, and that extra little bit really might just be thinking things through, planning your upcoming 2 weeks out. And what that does, what the planning process does as well, is it sets a framework down in your mind. I think of it as like laying tracks for a railroad, right? It lays down the tracks of what your future is going to look like. You've already envisioned how that future is going to go. And so the likelihood of it actually going that way, going back to creating your future and self-fulfilling prophecy, the likelihood of having it go the way you say it's going to go is creating that either that visualization or that representation in your mind of, all right, this is what this is what I have planned. This is what my next couple of weeks or whatever horizon you use is going to look like. So it's a simple thing, and I think its power is underestimated. So that's what I would advise people to do to increase their productivity right now. It's a simple thing, and it has profound effects.
I couldn't agree more, and I strongly I have noticed it in my own life that having integrity with my calendar and ensuring that I honor what's on my calendar, and if I'm not able to do it, then renegotiating my appointments, so to make sure that I commit to them. And I think that's made such a great performance impact as far as having productivity and achieving all my results and things of that nature. So yeah, thanks for the reminder and thanks for sharing.
Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah, one other question is, this is a hypothetical question, Jim, and if we had a time machine and if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, maybe a 25-year-old Jim, what advice would you give him?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know. It probably wouldn't have made any difference because I wouldn't have listened. Gosh. What would I have told my 25-year-old self? That's difficult because there have been many times in my life, and I've shared a couple of them where things haven't gone the way that I wanted them to, or my experience of life at the time was miserable, or my experience of my future was misery, and so my experience in the moment was misery. There's nothing that happened that I'm not in a way grateful for it happening. And not that I would recommend people be miserable, but it's difficult to go back and say, like, avoid this or avoid that or do this or do that. I mean, it would be more of a message of just, enjoy the ride, enjoy it. You have no idea how it's going to play out. And there's just, it's kind of going back to that quote, don't lose your enthusiasm, when what you might characterize as a failure. And I loved what you said about that earlier. I'm very much a fan of, or an advocate of, there are no failures, there are no mistakes. There's just outcomes.
Yes.
There's either the outcome that you wanted, or it's not the outcome that you wanted, and then we have all the baggage that we attach to it about failure or mistakes or all that kind of stuff. But it would really be do what you can, find those and grab onto the sources of enthusiasm from just constant or continual gratitude for everything that you have, because that's just it. A message of gratitude, of hope, of grabbing onto enthusiasm, because I don't have any thing to say like, don't make this mistake or don't do any of that, because everything has resulted in something profoundly wonderful on the other side of it.
Yes, that's so inspiring, and thank you for sharing. And it also comes down to, like, looking at it another way is, for me particularly, that's made a difference has been that life is a journey and not a destination. So enjoy the ride, and gain as many experiences, skills, and build relationships along the way. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And having spent much of my life doing that risk avoidance thing, sometimes it's like, well, I got some catching up to do because I didn't expose myself to much of that daring adventure in the past.
And you're definitely taking steps in that direction for sure. emceeing a fashion show and the symphony, and that's great. So, Jim, moving on to our next section, it's called the rapid fire round question.
Oh,
and
cool.
here I'm going to ask you a set of questions, and it's the first response that comes to mind. But if you certainly, if you feel you want to elaborate on it, feel free to do so. But again, it's a rapid fire round. So,
Okay.
Jim, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So the first question, Jim, for you is, whose brain would you like to pick?
Oh my gosh, whose brain would I like to pick? I would have to say Donald Trump. I want to know what's going on in there. Now, I don't mean this politically. I just, I'm a kind of guy that tries to stay away from the news because I don't know what to believe. But he's certainly got something different going on in there, and I'd love to pick that brain and understand it a little bit more.
So the second question for you is, if you could be successful in another profession, which would you choose?
I used to have a hard time answering that question, and it struck me, and it's being a movie director. I was watching one of those the DVDs that have the director dialogue over the top of the movie, and talking about what they did and how they did that, and I just got fascinated. It's like, what a wonderful project a film is, and a movie, and having that team of talented people working towards creating realizing a vision and making something. So it would be directing movies would be what I would what I would love to have done, and well, maybe I still can.
That's so great. I like that. And if God exists, can she be trusted?
Absolutely.
And the follow-up to that is, if you could ask God one question, what would that be?
I do this every day, practically. So trusted, yes. My relationship with God is kind of like, do you remember the old TV commercials? I think it was a margarine commercial. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. I don't know if you remember, that was a while back, but sort of Mother Nature is, and being a scientist, it's kind of like, the rules of nature are to be trusted. The life works, and everything has a rhythm to it, and you may fight that rhythm sometimes, but it's to be trusted. And when you go against your nature, when you go against it, that's when things get sketchy. And the question that I laughed about, that I ask all the time, and if I could ask God, it would be, what do I do now? Because it's a question that comes up in my moments of confusion or lack of clarity. It's like, well, what do I do now? So if I had somebody that could answer that question for me, an all-knowing power that could answer that question, I'd be so happy.
No, fair enough. That's so great. So the final question in the rapid fire round segment here is, if you could have any message of your choice on a billboard, what would that be?
It would be wake up. There's even in the moment I was just describing, it's like, well, wake up. What is there to do? I just wake up, snap out of it. Wake up and recognize like life, like the glory of life, the glory of the moment, of what you have, and of what you're really up to, what you really we all have a mission in life, whether we've discovered it or not. And I've talked to enough people about this that we all know it, we all feel it, we all say it. I just want to make a difference, right? It's like we're wired that way. And then the follow-up to that is, how do you want to make that difference? What is it? How do you want that to show up? And I think we all do that in the careers that we choose, and in the way that we go about that. So And I know that's getting a little off the topic a little bit, but that's just kind of where it took me. But it's really, like wake up. It's that, it sort of comes from the path to enlightenment, I guess. But recognize what's going on. Recognize so much of what we experience is that default or that treadmill. One of my taglines is get off the treadmill and go somewhere. And so much of what we do has a treadmill experience to it, but when we're really up to going somewhere, that's when life happens. That's when the miracles happen, and when the unexpected, the surprises happen, and that's what really light us up.
That's so beautifully stated, and it kind of reminds me of that story from Siddhartha, or the Buddha, that after he was enlightened and he was traveling through some villages, and he had this glow and radiance on his face. So people would stop him and ask him, like, "Are you a saint?" And he would say, "No." And "Are you an angel?" He would say, "No." "Are you God?" And he would say, "No." Then, "Who are you?" And he would say, "I'm awake."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's so great that you mentioned that. So the final section here is the wrap-up section, and I would like to start off this section by asking you, Jim, is what is your current personal passion project, and what are you looking forward to over the next 6 months to a year?
Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, you mentioned it a couple times, is this project with the Temecula Valley Symphony. Now, I know you're thinking, well, it's not really very much of a personal project. Well, it kind of is, because it's, well, in a sense, it's volunteer work for me. It started out as a consulting with them, but it's such an unknown, and why I'm excited about it is because the potential, going back to using that word again, the possibilities. This is an organization that's been around for a long time, for something like 23 years, and in our neck of the woods, that is a long time, and it's underappreciated, and what I mean by that is very few people know that it exists. And part of it is, well, who goes to classical music concerts anymore? But there's this whole possibility of re-energizing, reintroducing a type of live musical performance, that includes upwards of 70 people playing together to create something that is just, brings tears to your eyes, that creates an experience that we just don't see that much, especially when, your YouTube video can't be longer than 3 minutes, or, your soundbite has to be 30 seconds. And just the kind of lifestyle that we have now, to bring something like that to the forefront, to make it into, to take it to the next level, to use a shorthand way of saying that. So that's a big part of it for me. To go even more personal, so much of it really revolves around my family and my two teenage sons. My oldest is currently working on his Eagle Scout project, and he's going to be an Eagle Scout here in the next few months, and I do very little to support that, other than give him what he needs. I'm very proud of what he's been able to accomplish on that. My younger son has really gotten into lacrosse. We're going to a tournament this weekend, he and I, while his mother and my other son are going off to a scouting adventure together. So much of my personal life was really devoted to having my sons be, the best that they can be, if you will, to have them be people who contribute to their communities, to the world, and on and on from there.
That's so great. So, Jim, the next question I have for you is, what are 3 things that you're grateful for in life today?
Oh, well, I got to dovetail right into that. My wife, my kids, and certainly my health. I had heard recently, people who have their health want many things. People that don't have their health want one thing.
That's so great, so profound. I like that. Is there anything that I have not asked you, Jim, that you would like to share with our audience?
Oh my gosh! It seems like we've gone all over the place. This has been so wonderful. I've things have been uncovered in our conversations that I didn't even know were there. Nothing comes to mind. This has been a great journey.
Thank you so much for saying that. And how can people reach you, Jim?
Okay, so my website is jamesrmclaughlin.com. James R. McLaughlin is my author name. I haven't yet written a book, but that's my author name. I go by Jim. But from years and years of signing my name as a professional geologist, James R. was just always there. But so it's jamesrmclaughlin.com. What that does is it takes you to my profile page on the company that I work for, that I'm actually a partner in now, is morrisonmcnab.com is the other part of that. But if you can remember jamesrmclaughlin.com, that'll get you right to me. And on that page is my phone number, my email address as well.
And they can also connect with you on social media. I know that you have a very fantastic Facebook group called Courage and Confidence and Results, I believe, on Facebook.
Yeah, actually, that's a Facebook group that's only that I have for people that have been clients of mine. So you have access to that, and because as you know, when you've worked with somebody or you work in a field of study, there are conversations you can have with them that you can't have with people that haven't been exposed to that.
Right.
Like a doctor, you can have a conversation with other doctors that you can't have with the general public because there's a nomenclature.
Right.
There's a conversational domain. But I do have a Facebook page for that is also linkable from my website. So my LinkedIn profile is available there. My Facebook page and profile are linkable from that same jamesrmclaughlin.com. And I'd love to interact with anybody who is curious from this conversation to develop any of those other areas more fully.
That's so great. And for the audience's benefit, we'll include all his links on our show notes so that we can get in touch with Jim. So, Jim, I would like to acknowledge you for a few things. One, for really allowing failure to be used as a stepping stone and not losing the enthusiasm starting off on your journey of life, and really developing those skills that are so important in today's day and age, like listening and looking underneath and beneath the surface and listening for the unsaid within the communication, and really helping people with your coaching practice to create a future that they are inspired by, and to literally help them wake up to possibilities that they may have not seen for themselves. And the kind of community work and volunteer work that you do in your local community is also so inspiring. So, and really being a role model for living a life of integrity and family values, that is such an inspirational journey that you have led, that it's such a role model for all of us that follow you and learn from you and admire you and your leadership capacity. So thank you for that.
Acosta, thank you. I'm humbled hearing those words from you, and I can own it as well. So thank you very much.
And the final question, and this is how we wrap our interview, and this is the question is, Jim, why do you think people should listen to the wisdom of friends? Oh, wow.
So I've seen and listened to some of the podcasts that you have put up, and in looking at this conversation, as I was mentioning, it's gone all over the place. What comes up for me is it's kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, and it's all good. Right. This isn't what you've created here, and what you've provided an opportunity for, at least for me, is to have something new show up and something wonderful show up. I hope your audience feels that way, or has had that experience at least once or twice in our conversation. And if not, check out some of the other podcasts, because you certainly will. So I know that sounds kind of silly and Forrest Gumpish, but that's how it is. That's how it occurs for me.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I truly appreciate your time and candid answers. This was a fascinating conversation, as I expected it to be, and perhaps we might have you back for round 2. What do you think?
Oh, I would love that. Oh, wow. I didn't know there was a round 2 a possibility. So count me in.
Yes, definitely. And so I appreciate your time and enjoyed our conversation. And for those of us listening, with that, we'll wrap it up. And if you like what you heard, please share. Don't be shy. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Wisdom of Friends show with Cal Arras. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, theglobalcontribution.com. To your friends and colleagues, be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous episodes. This has been a 7 Symphonies production. Join us next time for another edition of the Wisdom of Friends.